AI is moving faster than ever. Everyone is talking about the chat GPT, agents, automation. But here's the fact, guys. If you don't know Python, then I can say that you're going to struggle in building anything real. That's why in this video, I'm going to show you three Python foundations, which you have to master whenever you're stepping into Agentic AI. And these are not just any random tricks. These are the actual building blocks when you're building an agentic AI system. I'll be covering three important things. One is functions, which is basically the tools that the agentic AI system would use. Dictionaries and JSON, which is like the communication in which that's the way in which the communications would happen between the agents or between my system and the another system. And the third thing is classes and object, which is like the blueprint of the agent itself. So by the end of this video, you will see how exactly these simple yet powerful Python foundation will be your pathway for mastering the agentic AI. So grab your notebook because this is where your agentic AI journey really begins. So let's start with the first concept, that is modular programming. Okay, so let's try to understand now about this modular programming. Now, when we talk about this modular programming, so the way that we would construct the program, especially in this agentic AI spaces, we'll be creating it as a function. Now, when I say function, functions are basically the block of reusable code, assuming that this box represents a piece of code that I have written. So when I say function, it's the piece of code that we would write it where we want to create it first and reuse it multiple times so that whenever I want to perform a specific task, let's say task one, I'll always go ahead and execute this particular piece of code we generally create it as a function. So by creating it as a function, it makes the program reusable, it makes it modular, and it also makes it clean. That means I can define this task one in a separate Python file. And once I define it in a separate Python file, it will be easier for me to, let's say, create another file and import the code from this file. So that is an advantage that we would have when we define these modularities. So before I dive into those modularities and everything, let me just give you an idea as how we can create a function in Python. Okay, I'm going to say demo.py. So py is the file extension and demo is the file script name or the file name that I'm specifying. Whenever we are defining a new function in Python, it all starts with the keyword of def and followed by the function name. Here, I'm going to simply say greet, and this function can accept an input. Like, for example, I'm going to say name. That means this is a function which accepts an input, and this input will be referenced into a variable of this function called name. And I can do anything over here inside it. I'm going to say do something. So in this case, there's nothing that I'll be doing. What I'll do is I'm going to say hello name. That means whatever the input that I would get, I'm going to concatenate it, or I'm going to use it in the string. Okay, if I mention the input as, let's say, Sam, then it will be returning it as hello Sam. Okay, that's the fundamental idea of this function that we have got. I've created a function with a name, and this will return the name with some hello greetings mentioned over here. Okay, now if I want to call this function, how can I call this function? I just have to say greet. And let's assume that I'm going to mention the input as Sam, like I mentioned. And now if I execute this particular Python script, I'll be getting the output as hello Sam. So let's test it out. Okay. So I'm going to say Python demo.py. So I'll say Python demo.py. And if I press the enter key, just observe the output. So I can see the output that says hello Sam. Okay. That's how simple it is to create a Python script, execute a Python script. And whenever we execute a Python script, we can see the output in the terminal window. So few things that you have to note down if you're a complete beginner to the Python, when you're creating something specifically to the agentic AI space, we create it as a Python script. And if you want to execute a Python script, you'll use the keyword that is Python, that is the command as Python, followed by the script name. So here in this case, Python demo py, and whatever the output that we have mentioned over here, it will be displayed into our console. So this is how a simple function can be written inside this Python programming language and how we can execute it in the terminal. So why this kind of functions are important, or why is it relevant for us in the agentic AI space? See, when we think about the large AI workflows, we generally divide those functionalities into small functions. So whatever the large AI workflow that I would have, let's say if I have 100-step AI workflow, I can divide that 100-step AI workflow into small functions. It can be, let's say, 100 different small functions, so that we know if a particular step fails, we know which function is the root cause of it and where I have to fix it. And another advantage is, once I create a function and once I define it in this manner, I can actually call this function anywhere inside other Python script as well. Okay, I'll give you a simple example. Okay, I'll create a new file. This time I'm going to say example2.py. So from this demo.py, I've already created a function called greet. Now, if I want to use this, I'm going to say from demo, I'll import greet. Now I'll say print greet Alice. Now, if I execute this new script that I have, see, I've got an output that is hello Alice. Now you also see the output as hello Sam. Now the reason this hello Sam is getting displayed because that's part of the code over here. That's part of the code of the script. And that's the reason that you see the output as hello Sam as well. And if you take a look at it from this example2.py file, we are able to access the function that I've created inside this demo.py file. So once I define a function in a specific Python script, I can call that function anywhere. So that's an advantage of creating the function. And I can call these function as many number of times that I want. Like, for example, something like Wonderland. Okay. I'll execute the script again. See, hello Sam, hello Alice, hello Wonderland. So I can call the function any number of times. Okay. That means when you're creating the agentic AI, when you're creating any step over here, you can, let's say, I'm just giving you an example. Let's say there is a formatting step. And in order to do the formatting, we generally define it as a function in Python. In such scenario, you can create a function with the Python formatting. And once you call this function, like once you create it, and you can call that function or invoke that function multiple times, depending on your processing requirement. So that's the advantage that we would have. And another best part that we would be having, like specifically in the agentic AI space, I think once you start creating these code, you'll come across those as well. That's called as chaining. So chaining is nothing but we also use a term called composing the agentic AI step. So what happens in that chaining or composing is, in the multi-agent pipeline, or even in the case of single agent, when we want to apply multiple functions, I can chain one function with the another function. Like, for example, I can say function one to be chained with, let's say, function two to be chained with function three, and so on. So I can create such a chaining over here so that the output from one function will be sent as an input for the another function, and so on. So these are all some of the advanced capabilities that you would look at, especially from this core Python programming, particularly the functions and this modular programming standpoint. Okay. So I'll give you one more, I'll show you an example. I think I should be having one example here, especially for this chaining. Let's see if I have one. Okay. This is a very simple example, okay, to help you understand how this concept of functions will be used. Okay. Like for example, over here, this template, I've defined it as a particular function or an object. Just for simplicity, you think of it as a function. This template is like a one function object that I've created. And we have one more function object that I've created, that is model. Okay, see, this is the model initialization that I have done. So if you take a look at it, this step is called as chaining, where whatever the input that I would get, first I'll be sending to some template. And once the template is generated, you can actually go ahead and apply this template to a model. So that's how this template and model will be linked. So that's how these concept that I've just described is used whenever you're building an agentic AI workflow. Okay. So what I want you to remember right now from this concept of Python functions, which I've just shown you right now, is when you're just writing the code and when you're creating the functions in Python. So just remember this, you're not just writing the code, you're actually learning how to, uh, like you're actually designing the skill which these AI agents would use. So that's the, I'll say, the importance of this modular programming, or that is this Python functions, guys. So is it clear so far? Is it simple, guys? So if it's simple, type in simple, guys, in the chat window. Thank you, Ambrose. How about others? Is it simple? Enrico, Sumant, CEO, Praveen Kumar. Excellent, guys. And there's a question from Sampath. Don't we need init.py for Python to recognize as package for important? Isn't it mandatory? That's a good question, Sampath. So we actually mention it when we have to access or when we want to make a particular folder as a package. So in this very simple demonstration, since I have mentioned both the files in the same folder and I'm not accessing any separate folder, that that's a reason that was not necessary. But in case if I have this file in a separate folder, then having this init.py will be helpful for us. And that's a good observation, Sampath. Okay, excellent, guys. All right, awesome. So we've just learned about an important concept, that is Python functions and its relevance in the modular programming. Now, let's go ahead and dive into our next concept that we have got. The next concept that I want to take you through, I'll say that it's one of the core concept of the Python programming, specifically for the agentic AI space. And here, even though the topic is very simple, but let me tell you, when you're building a real world application, this is a highly used technique or a topic from the core Python programming. That's actually called as the Python dictionaries and JSON. Okay. Now, when I say Python dictionary, you know already, like, or if you are not aware of it, I'll just make it very simple for you to understand. It's a object in Python programming language where we have key value pair. Like think of it as a telephone directory that we would maintain. So if you think about how we would maintain a telephone directory, let's suppose that we don't use any electronic device, we just maintain it in our notes. So we'll write a person name and we'll mention the name that is associated with that person. So here, the name that you would mention, think of it as a key, and the telephone number that you have just written, think of it as a value. So that means if you have two friends with the same name, let's say Sam, then in such scenario, just like by writing the Sam same twice in your notes will make it confusing for you. In the same way, when we are creating this in Python programming language, these keys should be unique. Okay, that's a very foundational element that you need to remember when we are creating this dictionaries in Python programming language. Now that you know at a very high level what are these dictionaries, let's go ahead and create one Python dictionary so that you are comfortable with as how it actually look like. Okay. So I'll quickly share the screen and I'll create a new file. I'm going to say example3.py. Okay. So folks, don't worry about these file. Once the session is completed, I'll be uploading in the chat itself. You can go ahead and download these files at a later point as well. Okay. Yes. So let's talk about the dictionary. How do we actually create it? So we've just understood that. So dictionary is a collection of key value pairs. Okay. So one key thing that you need to remember is keys must be unique. Okay. So that's one thing. And the values can be any data type and values can be duplicated as well. Okay. So let's go ahead and create one example. I'm going to say learner is equal to, I'm going to mention some name. Let's say name as John Doe, age 25, and maybe courses that he has got is Python, machine learning, data science, and few values that would look something like this. So what we have just created is we've just created a Python dictionary. Okay. Where the reason that I'm saying this as a Python dictionary, because in the case of our Python dictionary, we are going to enclose the values within this curly braces. And we separate key and value with colon. So this is key and these are values. The one in pink that I'm highlighting right now, these are all the values. Okay, keys and values. So whenever you're creating a Python dictionary, these keys should be unique. So this is an important thing that you need to remember when you're working in this Python programming language. Now, once we create this Python dictionary, suppose a common use case is I want to access the value associated with a particular key. Let's say I want to access the value that is associated with the key of name. Okay. Then in such scenario, the way that we would access it is we'll say Python dictionary. And inside the square bracket, we will mention the key. Like for example, I'm going to say name. So in this way, we can access the value by referring to the key. So if I now execute our Python script that we have got, see, I've got the output as John Doe. That means I'm able to create a Python dictionary and I'm able to retrieve the value that is associated with that dictionary's key. Okay, that's a fundamental of this Python dictionary. Now, an important element, as I mentioned, it is specifically important from the Python Agentic AI perspective is JSON. Okay, let's try to understand what is JSON. So when I say JSON, it's a JavaScript object notation. It's a lightweight format for storing as well as exchanging the data. That means whenever we have two systems, for the data to be exchanging between those two systems, in such scenario, we use this JSON notation. And this JSON is used everywhere. It is used in APIs. It is used in AI models. It is used in agent communication. So it is used everywhere, guys, especially whenever the communication needs to happen between two systems. Okay, in such scenario, we generally use this JSON format. Let me just give you an example. Let's say we have two applications. Let's say I have WhatsApp and Zoom. Okay, so WhatsApp is one software and Zoom is another software. Now, if I have to have a communication between these two different software, they have to communicate in a language which is neutral to that software. So it should be a neutral one so that any two systems can utilize, and that is where this JSON will come into picture. So whenever, let's say, Zoom has to call WhatsApp, maybe I'll just give a random example. It will call the WhatsApp system through this JSON. And since JSON is not a software specific one, it's a generally used notation. it is able to read this notation and it will generate the response to the Zoom that says, as, okay, I've received your input, I've processed it. It will send the response in JSON. So that's an important, I'll say, the way in which the exchange of data would take place. And when you're working with the Agentic AI system, you'll be having the access to the tools. That means you'll have some additional capabilities that you'll be attaching to the model. And in some cases, you might have to communicate with, let's say, the other systems to do some check. From it can be the in-house system, or which is part of your overall tech stack, or it can be the external system as well. In all those scenarios, you'll be working with this JSON files. So let's try to understand this in an efficient way so that you are comfortable with this JSON as well. So when you think about this JSON, so I can say that this JSON at a very high level, it is very much similar to the Python dictionary. Okay, it is very much similar to the Python dictionary, but it's a text based. Okay, that's the only thing that you need to remember. It's a text based elements that you will be creating. So let's try to understand how we can create such JSON file inside this Python programming so that it's easier for you as you start working with this agentic AI system. I'll give you a very simple way. Okay, so I'll create a new file. I'll say example 4.py. So for demonstration purpose and in order for us to work with this JSON file, so I'm going to import a built-in module that's called as JSON. Okay, in Python programming, there's a built-in module called JSON. I'm going to import this JSON. And what I'll do is I'll create an example data. Okay, so the way that we would generally work here is when we are writing the code inside our Python application, we generally generate it as a Python dictionary. And when this information has to be going out to the another system, that's where this dictionary will be converted into a JSON format. And whenever I get any information from the JSON, okay, that is from the other system, if I want to store it and use it in an effective way, I'm going to convert this JSON into the Python dictionary format. So that's how this kind of conversion and this kind of notation will be helpful for us. So let's take a look into the first step, that is, how can you convert a dictionary into a JSON? So here in this scenario, okay, I'll go ahead and I'll mention it in this way. So I'll just give a very simple example. I'll say agent. I'm going to call it as researcher. Okay. And maybe I'll just mention some another key. I'll say find AI trends. Okay. That's the task that I have. Okay. Maybe I'll mention one more thing that's called as status and I'll mention as in progress. So this is a traditional Python programming dictionary object. Okay. Just for simplicity, I'm going to print it. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to convert this Python dictionary into a JSON string. So if I want to convert it into a JSON string, I can simply say JSON and call a function called dumps. Okay. And mention the Python dictionary for which I want to convert it into a JSON object. So this will straight away go ahead and convert this dictionary into a JSON string. Okay. Now, once this is done, I'll go ahead and I'll print this JSON data. Okay. So I'll print the type as well as I'll print the JSON data as well. Okay. So now let's go ahead and execute this. And once this is done, we'll also go ahead and convert back. That means we will parse it. We call that activity as parsing. So I'm going to say Python example 4.py. Okay. We have the first output, which is a Python dictionary. Now, since I converted it into a JSON, and what I mentioned at the start itself, JSON is a text-based one. So that's the reason you see the output as string format. And if you take a look into the data, see, it's basically the JSON string data has been displayed for us. Okay. Now, how do we read this JSON file? Like, how can I convert this JSON data back to a Python dictionary? So I'm going to say parsed. Like, generally, when we are converting the data or processing the data, we use the term of parsing. Okay. So hence I'll mention as parsed data is equal to JSON.loads. And I'll just mention my JSON data. So this will convert this JSON string back to our Python dictionary. So let's do that validation. I'm going to display the type and I'll go ahead and display my dictionary itself. Okay. Let me rerun the code again. See, this is before parsing. That means it has been converted to JSON string. Now, once we have done the parsing, you can see the data type that is now as Python dictionary. And then you can see it has been like it's now in this dictionary. So you can also go ahead and maybe access a value as well. Just for simplicity, I'm going to say agent. So I can also access the value by key just to validate that it is in the Python dictionary format. So in this way, we generally work with JSON in our Python programming language. Now, the reason that we work with this JSON, as I mentioned, one, for the communication to happen. And along with that, if I simply use a Python dictionary, there's a very high chance that the format might not remain the same. So in order for us to have a correct structured format, that's the reason that we actually use this JSON format. So by creating this uh, data in the format of JSON, so we can ensure that the data will always be in a structured format so that we can pass this information in a reliable manner. So that's the importance of working with this JSON data. And another reason that it is important to know how to work with this JSON is most of the APIs, including the ChatGPT APIs or any of the APIs that you would generally work with, it returns the JSON format. So in order for our Python programming modules or the frameworks to utilize, that means whether it is LangChain, LangGraph, or any framework, we have to parse this JSON into a dictionary so that we can utilize it in an effective way. And when we are working with, let's say, the agents, when we are working with multi-agent system, where the information has to pass from one agent to the another agent. So in such scenario, these conversation, the state, the logs, so all these are generally stored in this JSON-like structure so that whenever it is required, we can push this dictionary or this JSON-like structure to a file, which can be read by, let's say, the monitoring tool so that we can know the status of our agentic AI system. So that is how this dictionary and the JSON connect in this agentic AI together. So we store the memory, the user goal, convert like whatever the conversations, the information that we have got, all these in the format of this dictionary. And when we want to, let's say, use it in the other system, we convert it into a JSON. So what you have done right now is you've just mastered this dictionary and JSON, which is the language that our AI agents generally speak. Okay. So these are all the structured way in which the information will be discussed between the agents when we are working, guys. Okay. So I'll take a pause here, guys. So are you able to follow along so far? If you are able to follow along so far, please type in yes in the chat window. Or if you've got any question, let me know, guys. Okay, Rakesh, Ranjit, Prasad, Ambrose. Okay, excellent. Okay, yeah, this session is also recorded. You'll also be able to access it at a later point as well, team. Thank you, Vijay, Venu, Enrico. Excellent. All right, guys. Okay, now let's talk about the next concept that we have got, that is the basics. I'm going to say very basics about the object-oriented programming, that is classes and object. Okay. So let's try to understand as how it actually works. All right. So I'll just resume the screen sharing. So I'll create one more file. I'll say example5.py. All right. So folks, when we talk about the classes and objects, okay? So I just want to know from you as, are you aware of this classes and objects in a programming language standpoint? Or is there anyone who doesn't know? Just let me know in the chat window. Are you aware or are you not aware? Okay. Some of you are aware and some of you are not aware. That's great. Not a problem. Okay. So let me explain it, guys. Okay. So don't worry. I'll explain right now. And for those of you who are very new to the Python, so there's also a wonderful resource that is in place for every one of you. And I want each of you to spend your time to go through that resource and master this Python programming. For now, I'll give you a very high level idea about what is this classes and objects in the Python programming standpoint. And I'll also point you at the end. Okay. After this, after I explain all these things, I'll take you through at the end as how you can access this Python foundations. So let's talk about the object-oriented programming foundation, that is classes and objects. Okay. So I'll explain with a very simple example, raw example, but I think that's an easy way to understand. So let's say that you want to construct the home, okay, not purchase a flat. Let's assume that, okay, you have a empty plot with you and you want to go ahead and maybe construct the home. So let's try to considering that use case. Okay, let's see how we generally do it. Let's say you have a piece of land. Okay, this piece of land is, let's say, 80 by 100. Okay, now considering this piece of land is 80 by 100, what is it that you would do? So you will go ahead and meet an architect. And first thing that you will do is you'll go ahead and create a plan. Now, this architect will take a piece of paper. Maybe he'll use his own software for creating the plan. Maybe he will use some AutoCAD or similar modeling tool. And using that, in this 80, like in this demonstration, he or she will go ahead and create a plan that says that, okay, this is where your entrance, this is where your parking, this is where your living room, this is where your kitchen, this is why bedroom one, maybe bedroom two, and some dining hall, dining area. So like this, he will go ahead and create a plan for you, which each of them will have a dimension mentioned that says, okay, what is the dimension of kitchen? What is the dimension of entrance or parking and all those things. Okay. So you have all those things mentioned in this document, and we call this as a blueprint. Now, if I get a blueprint, does it mean that I got a home? No, it means that I just know how my house would look like. That's what a blueprint would mean in a general way. If I have to construct a home, what is it that I have to do? I have to meet maybe a contractor or an engineer who can actually fulfill the task, or a company. I'll have to take this blueprint to him or her, and using this blueprint, they will go ahead maybe and build some actual house, assuming that this is my actual house. So unless and until this actual house is built, I do not have any place to stay. So the blueprint will not give me the house. Blueprint will tell me how the house would look like. Once I construct the house, that's where I can move in to that house. In the same way, in the programming standpoint, we have something called as classes, which is like a blueprint, which tells us how the object would look like. Now, in this example, object is like a home. So in the classes, you will define all the properties of the object. Okay, I'll have one object, just like you have a kitchen, you'll say, I'll have kitchen as one object, this one as another object, living room as another object. You'll go ahead and maybe like whatever the object that you're defining, you'll define those properties inside the class. Just like the blueprint, when the architect gets created, he will mention every dimension, everything, right? In the same way, we define everything about our object inside the classes. Now, once I create the class, it does not create an object. If I have to, and it does not have any memory. So just like will not have any house until we actually build it. In the same way, when I simply have classes, it does not have any memory. It just has a blueprint of my object. Once I create an object, we'll have the actual object which has got memory allocated to it. That's the fundamental idea of classes and object in Python programming language. Okay. Now, from the programming standpoint, inside the class to define the information about the object, we generally define it with the help of variable or a function. Okay. Variable is called as attribute and function is actually called as the method. So that's the very high level idea and a simplistic way to explain this class. So let's just see with an example, and that makes this concept very easy for you to process it. If I want to create a class in Python programming language, I'm going to say class and I'll say dog. Okay, this is a dog class. Okay, I'm creating. And over here, I can go ahead and define some functions class, which basically called as a method, or I can also go ahead and create some attribute, which is nothing but the properties. For example, I'm going to say there's a special function called init. We generally use it to initialize the objects whenever we are creating. So I'm going to say name, breed. Okay. Now, whatever the values that we would be getting, we'll be using it. I'm going to say these are all the attributes. So that means for our analogy and with the example, the dog is basically the class. And inside this dog, this is a one function. This is called as a method. Inside this function, I've defined two variables. These are called as the attribute. And likewise, I can create another method as well. Like for example, let's say bark. And this will return, let's say self.name says hoof. Okay. So let's try to understand this. So what I've just created is I've created a class like a blueprint. I've got two methods inside it. And there are two attributes. This basically is a blueprint of my object. That means whenever I want to create any dog object, or when I create it, it will have all these variables attached to it, and it is able to access access this particular method. So let's take a look into the example. So once I create a class, if I want to create an object, I'm going to say dog1. For name, I'm going to mention as buddy. And for breed, I'll mention as, let's say, golden retriever. Okay. Likewise, I'll create one more dog as well. And the second dog, I'm going to call as Max with the name and Beagle as the breed. Okay. So what I've done is by using the same blueprint, I've created two separate dogs. So just like using the same blueprint of the house, I can create multiple houses in the same way. By referring to the same class in Python, I can create multiple objects. Now, once I create this, I can go ahead and access the functions that are part of that individual object. Let's say I'm going to say dog1.bark, dog2.bark. Once this is done, we'll just execute this code so that you'll be able to understand this. Example5.py. So once I execute this, see, buddy says oof, Max says oof. That means I'm able to create two objects by referring to the same class of dog. And I'm able to assign different properties for each dog. For first dog, I mentioned the name as Max, and the breed is first name is Buddy, and the breed was Golden Retriever. And for the second dog, I was able to set a new name of Max and the breed of Beagle. So I'm able to set these attributes when I'm creating the object. So once the object is created, and we can validate that those are the properties that we have set right here. So this is called as the object-oriented Python programming in object-oriented Python programming, guys, in Python. Okay. So whenever we are writing the code and when we are actually working with the various libraries such as LangChain, LangGraph, or similar framework, we like most of their documentation, if you take a look at it, they have actually written it as a class. I'll give you a very simple demonstration to give you the importance about it. Let's consider a simple example. Let's say this chat OpenAI. Okay, this chat OpenAI is something that I've imported from this LangChain, right? So take a look at this chat OpenAI. This is basically what is it? It's a class. So most of the imports that you would be doing in the agentic AI, they're basically the class. Now, when you import this class and when you execute a particular code, what you're actually doing is you're creating the object of that class. That means in this other code that I was just showing you, so here on this top step, I've imported the class. And over here, I've just defined the object. See, I'm sending some value over here, some attribute. Think of it as the attribute. I'm setting some attribute for this class and I'm creating an object. This object is basically the model. The model variable is basically referring to the object of the class chat OpenAI. So that is how we generally use this classes and objects in every step in this agentic AI space whenever we are writing the code. So by doing this, we are able to by doing this, it makes our code cleaner. It makes it modular. So if I have a Python function, I have to take care of this management, everything. That means the function is a single function. And if I have to manage it, I'll have to create it in a Python script. But if I have to package it, we generally package it as these classes so that it is more cleaner approach. It is more scalable approach. The reason that we will call it as scalable because let's say we have chat OpenAI, one class is there. Now, if I want to add any additional functionalities, I can use the various concept of object oriented programming and extend this existing class. I can extend this existing class with my own additional functionalities as and when I would require. So that's one of the advantage that we would have by using this classes and objects in Python programming. So all these things that you're seeing, these are all actually actual codes of this agentic AI. So this value that I'm sending, they're basically the attributes. And uh, so, yeah, I think this invoke is basically a method inside that class of this chain object. So the attributes are basically the agent name, memory, tools that we would assign. Those will be the attributes. And method will be this individual agentic action that we would create. So those are some things that we generally use it in our agentic AI. So overall, the three skills that we have learned, that is the Python functions, that is the modular programming approach. So think of it as the skills of the agent. The dictionaries and JSON, these are the ways in which the communications would happen in the agent memory. And even if there is any communication that happens between my agent system to the third party system, that's where this JSON will be used. And in my code, I'll be using dictionary. So dictionary to JSON changes would happen depending on how we are working. And the third concept that you have learned is classes and object. So the agent itself that we'll be creating or the model itself that we'll be initializing, they're basically the classes written by these developers. So we import those classes and we would go ahead and create an object from those classes and use it, guys. So that's how these three fundamental concepts in Python programming language is connected to this agentic AI. Now, most of you or some of you have mentioned that you do not have the access to this core Python programming. Now, I'm going to be giving you the resources for you to follow along for this free Python programming, guys. But I want one promise from you. I want you to refer it because most of the time, the learners will go ahead and think that having the content will help me to gain the knowledge. It's not that. You have to take that first step and just dive and just start learning. So once you start putting your effort, that's where you actually see the results, guys. So I'm going to do my part, and I'll be sharing you the free resources for you to master this Python foundations for this agentic AI. But I want each of you to promise that you would go through that resource and master this Python programming. So can I have that promise from you guys? To promise me, please type in yes in the chat window. I've shared you the link. Use that link to access it. Thank you, Enrico, Ranjit, Venu, Satish, Vijay, Ambrose, Shant. So folks, I'll show you as how does that course would look like, okay? So once you register, you will be getting this course attached in the portal, that is Agentic AI Prerequisites Python Foundation. Just go through it. And over here, I've given you a complete information starting from setting up the system. Starting from setting up the system and the important concepts that you need to know from the Python Foundation standpoint. So most of you might have already have the access. If not, go ahead and use that link that I've shared with you just now and go through this link and start your learning journey, because having the resources is like you having a bike in your home. If you don't drive it, you'll not be able to enjoy it. In the same way, you have to use this resource and learn it. And that's where you start seeing the progress, and that's where you start moving forward, guys. All right. So, folks, I want to say thanks to each and every one of you for staying with me till the end. So you have actually learned some of the three DNA elements of our agentic AI, that is functions, dictionary, JSON, and classes. All right, guys. Now, if the simple video on Python Foundation gave you a confidence on this agentic AI system, imagine how you would feel when you start building these agentic AI system which are real in nature. Now, that's exactly what we do inside our 8-week Agentic AI Mastery Program. You'll go from Python foundations or Python basics to multi-agent system. You will learn to deploy these AI agents on the cloud, and you will add the guardrails, monitoring, as well as the industry projects to your portfolio. So this bootcamp is designed to help you become one of the most in-demand AI professionals of 2025. So the link to enroll is right below the video. So don't wait. Every day, the AI is moving ahead, and I want you riding it instead of just watching it or just chasing it. So if you found this video helpful, hit like, subscribe, and share it with your network. And don't forget to follow me in the LinkedIn. And I look forward to seeing you next time, guys. Thank you so much for watching.